much for being here. So these are all beautiful people who I happen to know in the community. People where I've seen their work, one of whom is one of my best friends. And so I was like, let's put together a wonderful panel, particularly of Black folks who are in this work, who've lived this work. I'll be moderating the panel as well as sharing a little bit, but it's mostly about what they can bring to the table. So I'll be sharing their bios real quick. One second. Bear with me, everybody. It's been a busy morning. Okay, I got it. All right. Thank you for your patience. All right, so first, to my left, we have BJ Williams. He's right here. Give him a hand clap. So I met BJ at an open mic at Hilltop Cafe. It's not too far from here, a few months back, and I was like, wait, he'd be a great person to be on the panel. So BJ Williams, an educator, advocate, athlete, has experienced his share of his life traumas. As a teenager, BJ lost his mother to alcoholism, and as a young adult, his brother to suicide, with both losses taking a toll on his mental and emotional health. And after being introduced to therapy through couples counseling, BJ began his mental health journey. Compelled to share his story, BJ took to social media posting what is now the first episode of Can I Be Vulnerable? Disrupting the common and often false narratives surrounding Black manhood and mental and emotional health. Hashtag Can I Be V is a series that invites men to share their stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, transparently and without judgment. Working from the belief that healing begins not only with identifying but also expressing our wounds through the hashtag Can I Be Vulnerable, BJ aims to break the stigma of mental health in the Black community, and BJ encourages men to embrace their truth and emotion and understand that there is strength in vulnerability. Thank you. And we have Dr. Sheena Young. This is tweets from her words, but Dr. Sheena is a soft-spoken person but powerful. She is a licensed holistic and body-inclusive psychologist, trauma-informed yoga teacher, energy healer, and survivor of many things. She holds space for Women X and women of communities of color with the intentions of inviting deeper authenticity and personal truth. She owns a private practice and healing space, Embodied Truth Healing, and psychological services in Inglewood, California, with an emphasis on listening to the body and healing intergenerational trauma, and most recently answered her ancestors' call to create an online directory of Indigenous healers and healers of color for our people. Heal in Color is a movement of remembering and reclaiming sacred traditions as communities of color. It is a bold movement of decolonizing our bodies, our healing, and our ancestors. Dr. Sheena Young. And by the way, all of the panelists' information, their emails, websites are on that colorful resource sheet, so you don't want to walk out without that. So next, we have Lauren Ludlow. Lauren and I have been best friends since we were 12 years old. Now I'm 27, so we're family. Lauren Ludlow, MSSA, Masters in Social Administration?
Yeah, it's just like a Master's in Social Work.
Yes, MSW or Masters in Social Administration. ASW is a social worker, therapist, and community educator whose work has focused on creating empowering and inclusive social service environments. Lauren is a Los Angeles native and earned her Master's of Science in Social Administration from Case Western Reserve University in Ohio in 2015. After graduating, she gained experience as a case manager, therapist, and program administrator in settings ranging from affordable housing to foster care to hospice. Lauren served as an adjunct professor at Azusa Pacific University from 2016 to 2018. She currently works in the special needs program at Jewish Family Services of Los Angeles. She also sits on the board of the Broome Family Foundation, a family empowerment and youth development nonprofit. Give it up for Lauren. And we have Terrence, and then I'll share my little bio. So Terrence on far left. I discovered Terrence on Instagram through a friend of mine. She does yoga and healing circles, and he was featured in, I think it was a hike called Soul Asana. That's how I found him on Instagram. So Terrence Stewart is an associate clinical social worker in Los Angeles, California. Terrence graduated from California State University in Northridge with his master's in social work in 2018. He has worked primarily with the justice population and rehabilitating probation youth and parolees. Since graduating, he has worked as a therapist in South Los Angeles area providing mental health services. Terrence currently works as a psychiatric social worker for LA County Department of Mental Health and Mission Community Hospital. Terrence is also the founder and CEO of T-Raw Naturals, which is an all-natural product line which helps empower people through the use of natural products. Give it up for Terrence. And I will share a little bit about myself. So I'm Marguerite. I'm a musical artist, pianist, Reiki practitioner, and wellness advocate. And I use my platform to raise awareness on mental illness through music and through healing work. Currently, I work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Urban LA, where I manage the school-based programs along with Narit and Araceli, and also social media. And I also have my own organization, Freedom and Soul Healing, which is an organization that uses the arts as activism to promote positive mental health, holistic health through a holistic healing lens. So I collaborate with other healers, social workers, folks in the community, yoga practitioners, Reiki practitioners to put on community workshops. I am currently applying for my master's in social work to continue my work in mental health, and I do believe that healing is holistic, mind, body, spirit focused. I have spoken at LMU, USC, and Department State Hospital in Norwalk, to name a few. And through my advocacy, I hope to create more empathy and compassion in the world, letting others know that they are not alone and that hope exists. Thank you. So we're gonna get started. We know we said we're scheduled to end at 4:30, the panel. We might go a little bit over, but we do wanna keep within time. So every question that they have, we're timed, and so I'll be monitoring with my timer here. So we have a general question for all of the panelists. They're gonna have 2 minutes each to respond, and then the question is, what led you to this work of healing, mental health awareness, social justice work? So let's see. BJ, you want to start? Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody, first and foremost. So what led me to it, honestly, was a very selfish reason. It was just something that I needed to do for me, which is why I decided to share this. My journey was just to share why I went to therapy. That's really what it was. I didn't want to do anybody else's episode, so like I said, it was very selfish for me. But with sharing my own story, the response to it was tremendous. I was going to say overwhelming, that's not the right word. It was a tremendous response to it, and all of a sudden I had friends call me to say, like, BJ, I want to tell my story. So that's kind of what led me to continue on. And then, funny, somebody said, you know what, BJ, somebody will pay you to do this. And I was like, I can get paid and help people? So why not? So that's basically what it is for me, and why I continued to do my docu-series, Can I Be One, was just, it started off as a selfish thing, and then I realized that my friends saw that the door was open to do it, and it was all right. And then somebody said they paid me to do it. I was like, all right, well, why not? That's it for me.
Hi everyone, so I am soft-spoken. If you can't hear me, just give me a wave in the back, but I'll do my best. So what brought me is my personal journey as well. I am a survivor of many things. I've had a journey. I'm very transparent about that. And like many of us, I grew up in a community where the things that were happening weren't being talked about. And I remember being a little girl who could sense into other people's experiences in ways that I didn't have the life experience for. And noticed as a young one that I was holding space, that I was empathizing, and sometimes I could feel things that other people were feeling and maybe they weren't saying in the room. And so in many ways my profession chose me, but I also know that that was a survival skill that many of us learn in our communities. And so as my career progressed, I just paid attention to that. Given that I didn't have my own space to talk through things, I found dance, and I started to move, and I would notice so that's how my own experience has influenced how I work with the body as well in sessions. And when I went on to grad school, I started with my master's, and at the time I wasn't really seeing other people that looked like me doing the work that I wanted to do. And so I knew if people were gonna take me seriously at that time that I needed to keep going. And so I did for my doctorate degree, and here I am.
Hi, I just want to thank you all for being here. You have a lot of options of things to do on a Saturday, so thank you for participating in this really meaningful event. I think one of the things that got me started down my path is growing up actually in this community. I grew up on Welland Avenue, right down the street from here, and in a family that really taught me that if you're not serving others with what you do, then what you do doesn't matter. And that can be in whatever field. You can be an accountant and serving others, or whatever the case may be. And it was kind of a process of elimination. I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician, and then I was not so hot on the science classes. Then I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and then I had a really influential counselor for me who was a social worker. And I said, I want to be that person who can make that kind of impact. And as I've just continued working in different settings with different populations, that opportunity to make a difference in lives, and then also in systems, which then makes a difference in lives, has kept me going and kept me motivated, and that's what's brought me to this point.
Just kind of piggyback on what everybody else said, I do want to thank everybody for being here. This time is your biggest asset, and you guys decided to spend your time here, so I appreciate that. What kind of led me was I always had an itch for helping people, and I was really always been passionate about that. At what capacity, I really didn't know. I was looking to go into law school. I was actually looking to go into law enforcement. But it was crazy because somebody pulled me aside as I was like going through this, law enforcement thing. He was like, as a black male, that's probably not your position. And I was like, well, I had this thing. I was like, well, I can change it inside, da da da. And I'm like, okay. So that was my thought. Thinking back, I was kind of like, oh, well. But long story short, he put me aside. He was like, you know what? Like, I think you'll be a good social worker. And I was like, social worker. My understanding growing up from social workers was DCFS and baby snatchers. So like that was my concept and my perception of what a social worker is. So he was another black male, which is very, very rare in this field. He put me aside. He took the time to he works at a hospital, so he took the time. He got the clearance for me to go look around and see what he does. And he just kind of just gave me up on a lot of stuff. And I was like, you know what? I think this is something I really want to do. And now that I'm in it, my why always changes. So as social worker in any helping profession, you can kind of see for me, like, this in society things change all the time. So like me being in the capacity of helping people always changes as well. So that's kind of like my story.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to answer that question as well. So what led me to this work of healing and raising awareness on mental health was that I was diagnosed with a mental illness. Let me just make sure I'm on timer too. I was diagnosed with a mental illness 6 years ago. I went to Williams College in Massachusetts for 4 years, 2015, eventually graduated, but it was during the bridge between my study abroad and coming home where I started having symptoms of mental illness. So started hearing voices telling me to harm myself. I started hearing voices saying that you were gonna die and all these things. Eventually I ended up at a program at Dartmouth College. It was a business program and the voices would not stop. And eventually I had the thought of harming myself. And so I was like, oh, I gotta get to the hospital. The director of the program got me there. And so I'll share more about that journey later, but long story short, I've been dealing with mental health and mental illness for 6 years. My original diagnosis was schizophrenia, but it changed in the last couple years to borderline personality disorder, which I will share more about that and sort of the symptoms and what to look out for. But really, I think just suffering, it'll kind of push you to a place of like, you're either gonna make it work for you or not. And I started meeting other yoga folks. Like I started going to Crenshaw Yoga and Dance. My mom, who's sitting in the front, put me in yoga. Give it up for mom, right? She's been there through everything. She put me in yoga. This was like when I took a semester off from school in 2013, and I was very sick still feeling psychotic, and I was on medications, and and she knew yoga would help me. And then through that, I just kept going to like more yoga places, and I met like more Black healers and more people doing the healing work in South LA, and like Shelly, who she's going to share her poetry later, doing the artwork. And so it just became a part of my life, and now it's just a ministry in which I'm public about my journey. I'm a singer as well. I practice Reiki, which is a Japanese form of healing. And I try to curate spaces like this that we can have safe spaces to come together and talk. So that's really what led me to the work. Right on time. So the second question is, can you expand on what mental illness, mental health, and what mental wellness means to you? However we want to do it, whoever feels called to answer. You don't have to answer every question, but.
So what mental health and mental wellness means for me, let me just kind of back up, because I think mental health has a connotation where it's like it's something that isn't talked about, but it's just as important as physical health. You guys think about it. You guys break your arm, where you guys gonna go? Where you guys gonna go? So you guys are a doctor, physician. You guys aren't gonna go to your friend, right? Unless your friend is a physician or a doctor, right? So when we talk about like even like mental health and what that is, it's just, you know, it's a struggle that you have sometimes with your thoughts, sometimes a struggle that you have with your emotion, and you know sometimes things may seem unclear. So that's what mental health and mental wellness is for me. And I kind of make it so simple because I think mental health is such this big, broad thing sometimes where it seems kind of taboo, but it's actually, you know, we all, you know, have mental health. You know, we have mental health just as we have physical health. You know what I'm saying? There's different levels of it, obviously with mental illness and what type of diagnosis is and symptoms that we have with our own experience. But I think mental health is just as, you know, just like physical health. And that's kind of how I look at it overall.
Okay, so in my practice, I often am encountering people who are concerned about being diagnosed. And so the way I break it down is, especially for people of color, mental health or diagnosis, when we break the word diagnosis down, it means to know in its Latin origins. And so I describe it as a temporary and sometimes long-term description of lived experience or circumstances. And so in addressing some of the mental health stigma, many of us are navigating depression and anxiety because we've endured generations upon generations of trauma. And so these mental health challenges, and even that, describing it as a challenge versus an illness, or allowing it to be something that's self-defined, these come about to get our attention, to let us know that something's imbalanced, something's off, and we can pay attention, we can use it as a compass. I really think it's important to approach mental health, just like we were talking about physical health, from a holistic perspective, mind, body, heart, and spirit. Mind is about how we think about ourselves and the world. Heart is about relationship to self and others and the ways in which our lived experiences impact us. Spirit is about our relationship to our higher self, God, creator, source, whatever that might be for a person. And then body is how life manifests physically, whether disease or physical illness, or sensation, pain, and achiness. And so it is all of that at once, and ultimately it's human experience.
Just piggybacking on the other two things that were said, for me it's reattaching the head to the body, like you said, physically. For some odd reason, at some point we separated the mind from the rest of our body. And it shouldn't be that way. Just like you said, if you break something, you go to a doctor. If you break something mentally, which can be temporary or long term, you should go see a doctor. Again, it's considered taboo, and it's not. Who do you talk to the most, Mom? Who do you talk to the most? Who do you speak to the most? Like, who do you talk to the most? Who do you talk to the most? Who do you talk to the most? You talk to yourself the most. You speak to yourself the most. Nobody knows you better than you. And when you are at dis-ease, or dis-ease, you should go see a doctor for that. So that's what mental health and mental illnesses for me is that.
Do you want to answer?
No, I would just.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I think I just want to add a little bit in that for those of you who don't know, in terms of a doctor that you would see for a mental health issue, it would be a psychiatrist. A lot of people have never heard of what is a psychiatrist, and their job is really to help you, manage symptoms. Sometimes that means through medications, medication management. I know my psychiatrist does much more than that. What you'll find a lot is that people do complain that there's not enough psychiatrists looking at people holistically. So it's really tough, and then you don't see a lot of psychiatrists of color. So I encourage people that are into science, consider medical school. We need more Black and brown folks in definitely in social work, definitely clinical psychologists, but we're seeing more of us in it, but also in psychiatry and going to medical school. So that's the type of doctor that you would see. And I think mental health is something that I'm really glad we're starting to talk about. I know there's even people in my family and my aunts and uncles who really never understood my challenges. And I was shamed for feeling suicidal, not by my mom or my grandmother or people who have really, really been there, but also understand that for some people that you talk to, they may be like, oh, we don't need to talk about that, and that can be difficult. But I just want people to know that there are good organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are just a couple doors down, right behind Aki Bamboo, the Jamaican restaurant. Our office is there, Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And basically, again, we provide free educational resources to the community. We provide classes where basically you can learn more about how to support your loved one dealing with a mental illness. And if you're looking for groups yourself, there's a really great organization called SHARE. SHARE. They're in downtown in Culver City, and they actually have about 60 to 80 free donation-based groups that range from folks dealing with eating disorders to depression to schizophrenia. So I would write them down. We don't have them on our resources sheet, but SHARE is a really good resource. So I just wanted to add that. But yeah, so let's go into, I created some individual questions for each panelist because they all have their different expertise. So let's start off with Terrence. So Terrence, what has your experience been as a Black male identifying social worker, a field in which the representation of Black men has been historically low and underrepresented as mental health professionals, and have you faced any racism within the system? You have about 3 minutes.
My experience actually as a Black male social worker has been great. I don't know what else to say about my fulfillment as being a Black male and being able to help people that look like me. I will also say too, sometimes when you are the only Black male in an agency or somewhere you're working, then there's some type of, I always sometimes feel this is all my own stuff, is I have to uphold a standard, I have to act a certain way, you know what I'm saying? So that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not being my authentic self, but making sure that I'm on point, you know what I'm saying? So nobody's questioning my work ethic, nobody's questioning what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. But as a Black male, I don't see too much racism, and the reason why I feel like I don't see too much racism in my workspace is because I'm working at a social agency, so there's not too much direct racism, but I think there's a lack of cultural awareness in some agencies. And when I say that, I'll use this as an example. So when Nipsey Hussle had passed away, I was working at an agency where they did not acknowledge that, and they're in South LA. But yeah, right? So it wasn't acknowledged, and for me, that was in my head, I'm why are we talking about this? Because this doesn't, not only because I'm a fan, but also thinking about how does that impact our clients, because he has such a big impact in our community, and a lot of people looked up to him. So even having that cultural awareness and having an understanding of who we're serving and what we're doing, I feel like some agencies, it's not racism per se, but it's a lack of insight and cultural awareness of how we can kind of serve our clients outside of the DSM, which is the Diagnostical Statistic Manual, which is what we use to diagnose people with certain things. And getting outside of our own book, you know what I'm saying? Because you think about social services with certain people, like I said, things change all the time, so we have to be innovative, be on our toes about how we engage and how we serve other people. But like I said, my experience has been great. But like I said, for me, I do feel like I have a big responsibility in upholding cultural awareness in anywhere, any space or any agency that I do work for.
Thank you. Thank you, Terrence. The question for BJ is, what motivated you to start the Can I Be Vulnerable platform? And what advice do you have to Black men struggling with their mental and emotional health? How would you encourage them to seek therapy as a supportive tool for healing? So if you could explain a little bit of what Can I Be Vulnerable is for folks.
I started Can I Be Vulnerable? Honestly, I got tired of suffering in silence. And I realized that everybody has issues. Like we watch reality TV. Those are personal issues for people. And I don't think we realize that, even though it's entertainment for us, a lot of times those people go home and let that simmer and marinate within them, and they may or may not deal with that, in a positive, healthy way. So I'm like, why am I suffering in silence? Why am I doing this by myself? And then I kind of figure, like, if I give you me, how can you judge me, right? Like, what are you going to say about me? How are you going to speak to me? I know I just told you everything that I'm going through. So that was really like the motivator for me, was just tell my story, man, and just be in my truth. And that was that. I'm sorry. Make sure I got a question.
Yes, so also this,
Oh, what advice do I have for Black men struggling? We are not alone in this. Just being a Black man in America, we have shared experiences. I can't say, like yourself, I can't say I've experienced much racism. I did go to a predominantly white institute. I played college ball. So my experience with that is just a little bit different. We are seen as the leaders of the campus, so I can't say that we were doing, you know what I mean? So I can't say that I saw racism like that. But there's microaggressions that I've experienced. There's a lack of culturally competent people that I've been around. I've been an educator for 11 years now. So there are culturally incompetent coworkers that I've had, culturally incompetent students that I've had, parents that I've had. But to say I've directly had racism, I haven't. But I'm a Black man in America. I have been pulled over because I was driving a Cadillac. I was beat up too, so I probably would have pulled me over too. But still, you know what I mean? So it was those shared experiences. And then again, when I shared my story, I have a great group of friends that I've known almost my entire life. And we share, I know their stories and they know mine. But to see them respond to my story like they hadn't heard it, I realized I had something dope. And then when they shared theirs, it was almost like somebody said, like, finally, I've been wanting to say this out loud, and somebody did it. So that's what it was. That's pretty much the gist of Can I Be Vulnerable.
no, just like, how would you encourage them to use therapy, seek out therapy as a support tool?
How would I encourage Black men to seek out? It's dope. I'm gonna tell you what. It's not pretty. There's nothing pretty about going to therapy. It's extremely difficult. But I will say, it's an extremely brave thing to do. I know we like to say safe space. I like to call it brave space. You have to be a brave human being to say, I need help. And even braver to go get that. It's not pretty to go through. It's extremely hard to bring up everything you've gone through and have somebody help you work through that. But on the other side of that, it's just amazing. It's such a freeing thing. Physically, it's freeing. Emotionally, it's freeing. Mentally, it's freeing. Spiritually, it's freeing. So if you want to feel like a better you, and get that off your chest. There's nothing else to it.
Thank you. And by the way, just so everyone knows, we're going to do our best to end at 4, and we'll have a 30-minute Q&A, so write down your questions. We want to answer them. And I also want to bring up that, if anything you hear up here is sensitive or traumatic to you, feel free to step outside, grab the resources sheet. You can always call NYC Well is on that sheet. It's a 24/7 crisis and non-crisis text line and support phone line. So we want to make this a safe space, but if you need to take a breath of fresh air and step out, that's also welcomed. Okay, so next question will be for Lauren. Hi, Lauren. So in your work and systems work, and as a therapist, what has helped your clients the most who deal with suicidal ideation? It could also include like depression, anxiety, and what methods have you used to support them in that challenge?
I think one of the most important things is that, having suicidal ideation can be very scary, and it's really tempting to because society has taught us this, to label these as bad thoughts or to think, oh, I'm so wrong for having these types of thoughts. But to be able to say that this is something that occurs for a lot of people, it doesn't make you bad, it doesn't make your mind bad. It means that you're struggling with something, and actually I'm always very grateful if they're able to open up to me. As was mentioned, that's such a brave thing to do, because I mean, hopefully we have built up a good relationship, but it's hard not knowing how people are going to respond. So I'm always very grateful that they're willing to share. And then one of the difficulties I've found on the systems level is that when you are at a vulnerable place, like struggling with suicidal ideation, that's also this time when you're interacting with all of these systems that seem to not really want to help you. Your health insurance is not trying to pay for your therapy, or not trying to pay for, if you might need more intensive services, not trying to pay for that. You're calling around to maybe therapists, you're calling around to different resources, and the next appointment you can get is going to be 3 or 4 weeks from now, where they don't have room available. And all of those are really discouraging things when you're already in a place that's maybe very scary. So I try my best to be an advocate for my clients if I'm working with them as a social worker. I like to tell people, you know, it's really good. Everyone has maybe that friend or maybe a couple of friends who are just the ones who are not going to take it. They're the ones where if the food is not right at the restaurant, they're going to send it back. Like, maybe that's the friend you want to have on your team as you're talking to your insurance agency. Because sometimes it's easier to have that other person with you to say, oh, no, that is not acceptable. Oh, they're telling you that you don't qualify because you don't have this diagnosis. No, we're not going to stand for that. We need to talk to a manager or a supervisor. It can be really tough to advocate, but it's better if you have someone by your side, whether that is a social worker, or it is a friend, or it is a family member, because you deserve support. You do. There's no question about it, even if everything around you is making you doubt that. But I think that's just really important to remember. And I try to encourage people, try to get to know the supports that are available to you early, so that when if you are in a place where you need them, you're not having to try to kind of find them at that time when it might be the most difficult. But if you are having trouble, then reach out to the resources around you, to NAMI, to social service agencies, to trusted individuals who can help you access the support that you need.
All right, thank you, Lauren. The next question is for Dr. Sheena. So what does it mean to be a trauma-informed practitioner? If you could tell us what trauma-informed care is, and how can we practice trauma-informed care as it relates to other folks in our communities, especially as it relates to suicide prevention?
I love this question because I find that many of us in the room have probably experienced some sort of trauma, or we've witnessed someone else be impacted by something, or we know someone that we love and care about that has experienced trauma, and yet we don't know how to handle each other, and that with compassion. And sometimes we don't relate to ourselves even around our traumas and our difficult experiences with self-compassion. And when we think about what trauma is, what we lose in a traumatic experience is power and control, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's an interpersonal trauma, sexual abuse, a fire, right? Those are the two things that are stripped away. So trauma-informed considers that central. Our healing is about reconnecting with our sense of empowerment, with the ability to exercise power over our lives and how we define ourselves and our circumstances. And really it's about knowing that we have choice and options. So many of us have been moving through the world. We've been conditioned to believe that people have rights to our bodies, right? So when someone moves to touch your hair without permission, and all of the ancestors inside you are angry about that, but you feel like you can't say no or set a personal boundary, right? So trauma-informed is reminding us that we have the opportunity to set boundaries, and our personal space is ours. It uses invitational language, so instead of saying you should do this or you should do that, you say things like, well, have you considered this? And these are some of the options. When I'm talking with people in therapy or if I'm facilitating a trauma-informed yoga class, I say things like, you're invited to versus do this or do that or put your arm here. Maybe you try the arm above your head or maybe it's across the chest. Maybe you in the final resting pose because it may be unsafe to lay on your back, or maybe turning down the lights don't feel good. Anything can be a trigger. So trauma-informed really creates the space for people to reconnect with their bodies, their sense of empowerment, knowing that they have choice and practice over and over again in exercising power and control over their own circumstances. In suicide prevention world, I think the best thing you can do is to work with yourself to reflect on what some of your biases and judgments are around suicide. Are you able to ask someone the question without it sounding judgmental or critical or shaming? So sometimes I'll hear the question being asked, you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? Well, what's up with that question, right? In it is the idea that it's bad, right? There's something wrong with it. People may not say yes if they are because the question is loaded, right? So can we ask the question, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about harming yourself? And some of you might be noticing that even as I say that question, your body responds, something tensed up, it's uncomfortable for you. So it is uncomfortable, but how can we practice that so when we need to use that tool, we're ready. We've heard ourselves say it, and we're moving ourselves out of the way, our ego, our pride, our judgments, and all of that in order to be able to ask the question and help people get the support that they need.
Did anybody find that really helpful? Yes.